We acknowledge that Tri-Cities Community Television operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. We thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them along with the waters and all that is above and below.
As climate change reshapes the natural world around us, local communities are digging deep to prepare for what's ahead. On Tuesday evening, March 25th, Douglas Collage played host to Trees for a Changing Landscape, a free public workshop. The event, running from 6:30 to 9 p.m., was organized by the Wonderous Tree Fellowship in collaboration with the Burke Mountain Naturalists and the Tri-Cities Urban Forest Working Group. Backed by Nature Canada, the workshop brought together residents, ecologists, and urban planners from an evening of learning, discussion, and inspiration, centered around the vital role trees play in resilient cities.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Burness, and I'd just like to welcome you to tonight's Trees for a Changing Landscape workshop. And this is brought to you by Wonderous Tree Fellowship in partnership with Burke Mountain Naturalists and the Tri-Cities Urban Forest Working Group. We'd also like to express our gratitude to Nature Canada for providing the funding to make this event possible. So urban forests across Canada are facing some pretty big challenges. Despite these challenges, it's more important than ever that every neighborhood in the Tri-Cities has access to a healthy urban forest. And we're going to talk about why it's important and what each one of us can do to make sure that that happens. So our event tonight is taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of Coquitlam First Nation. So I'd like to invite Ed Hall, who is the former chief of Coquitlam First Nation, an environmental advocate, and a longtime friend.
Thank you, Nancy. Good to see you all. She wanted me to come up here and say a few words, so a few words. Thank you. Anyways, I want to thank Nancy, WTF, for inviting me here in conjunction with all the other active groups here that are protecting forests and whatnot. I too am a long-time advocate of it. And I just want to acknowledge all those people that have been involved in that. And putting your time and energy into it is it's key to getting all the good work done and trying to protect our air filtration processes that we have and have to live around. So the things that I've come to know about having more than just an urban forest, it's in conjunction with salmon habitats and whatnot too. And for those of you who do not know what I get active in, I'll have you know that I'm the president of the Wild Salmon Defenders Alliance. And thank you. So a little bit about that. We go up against open net pen salmon farms and whatnot. We provide monies to the folks there that have court cases. And our own Coquitlam First Nation locally here is in the midst or nearing the end of a hatchery build, because on the other side of that Coquitlam Dam there is The ancestors of the fish that used to run up and down here in cycles every couple to 4 years, with their migratory routes, inland and then going out to the ocean. So we had a springtime returning sockeye salmon called Coquitlam, which is redfish up the river. And so when the dam went in, there was still a lot of salmon that were up there, and they just became landlocked. And so here we are, fast forward, 125 years later, and so we're able to, get the genetics, the DNA of those fish, and still keep them going. And eventually they're going to be on the bottom side of the dam and be doing their usual fish thing, and going out to the ocean and coming back and whatnot too. So we really have to look after the river, and deforesting any of these upper reaches, such as a place called Burke Mountain, is really not one of the best options to do. Sure, it looks nice, people get these $1.5–2 million homes there, but development seems to get really involved in that. It's all about the almighty dollar, which the almighty dollar is the root of all evils. And myself, when I left office, I have not really gotten into big incomes or anything like that since I left office. When I was the chief from 2019 to 2023, and I advocated for not only for the people but also for the different groups that I go to, for trees and forests and salmon and everything. That itself is what I hold dearest. And since I left office, I work in non-profits too, so I'm there to help support, looking after people that are in homelessness and addictive journeys and whatnot too, that need help, and we can't shed enough light on that. I want to acknowledge champions in the community. Looks like I see a good friend there in the fourth row. She knows who she is. For helping people, it's very good. So I want to acknowledge all of you and all the elected officials that will be present. I didn't get to see everybody that came in here as I got here pretty close to starting time, and I was only allotted about 5 minutes here, but I could probably go on. But I don't think you want to listen to me. I'll use 5.5 minutes or so, and that's it. But yeah, my hands up to all of you for what you do, and please do not destroy the forest because it's key. One more thing here that I do want to touch on is from a lot of this deforesting that's been happening just above the floodplain down to the mouth of the Coquitlam there. There's been such a heavy siltation there. A quick little story too on the side here. My mother's a couple siblings way back in the 1960s and 50s. They used to line up 4 gill-netted boats down in the mouth there and race one another all the way up to the Pitt River Road Bridge. And while I was in office, we hosted a big group from Moti and whatnot. So we went for a little walking tour. We went under that red bridge, and there was a fellow standing there, hip waders way out in the middle of the channel doing some fly fishing. That tells me that there's not very much depth to the waters there. And that wasn't like in mid-year either, so it was a little bit earlier on. And so yeah, siltation is a byproduct and a result of deforesting, too close to the streams and whatnot. And what all of those trees do, how they work with the air. They've provided homes for the eagles. I know there's eagles that start getting to the upper reaches. I could watch, their flight paths when I'm on the Fraser River down near the Port Bridge of Douglas Island. And a really sad note on siltation. A lot of you folks that don't know, Coquitlam First Nation does have a cemetery down not too far, much more than 150 meters away from that red bridge. And that has been the subject of flood. Can you just imagine that? Ponder that for a moment. Flooded. We go to make an opening there to put somebody in their final resting grounds there, and we have to go no more than 3 feet down below the surface there, and there's a water pan right there. It's just everywhere around there. So that's all a result of development a little ways upstream here, and you know, a good friend of mine, Lou and I are colleagues way back, you know, pre-2010, and we've worked in the wholesale supply industry together, and as co-workers and whatnot. We've always maintained keeping in contact. I don't know if Lou is here now, but he's championing a petition to you know, protect that cedar stand that's, you know, in his eyesight, and hopefully it'll always remain there. And yeah, he is definitely you know, a big time ally when it comes to this too, and like he wants people to you know, sign that petition. And you know, if I could just say no to it right now, and that'd be the, you know, the bottom line right there, I would, or wave a magic wand or something. But anyways, I don't think I should go on too much longer than what I have. Sharing with you, you know, things about siltation, a cemetery that's you know, almost lost to water, and lots of habitat, you know, that usually, you know, protects bears from coming down into communities and rummaging through garbage, because you know, the damage to the streams and the lack of fish and everything else was a big fallout, and everything from just doing, you know, a tree stand removal. And you know, we're going to see the ill effects of it as time goes by if we keep on doing what's being done. So it's time to stop it and reverse it. Every tree that comes down, there should be 3 more that gets planted. Not just tiny little 2-footers. I mean, some that are, you know, have a chance to grow really fast. Hey, Seth, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ed, for starting us off with some really good words. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have some elected representatives with us tonight, and it's really important to have elected representatives who come out and listen to their constituents. So I don't think I know everyone in here. I probably missed some folks, but I know that I saw Matt Johnlick come in from City Council Coquitlam up at the back. And I believe that Rob Mazzarola is here, up in the back again. How come you guys are all sitting up in the back? Oh, and Terry Towner from City of Coquitlam, in the back again. So thank you so much for coming. We also have MLA Jennifer Blatherwick for Coquitlam Millardville, and she's our new Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity. And did I miss anyone else? I know there's one more person. And if we could just have you, Zoe, just self-identify and tell us.
Zoe Riley, Coquitlam School District.
Thank you so much. No, sorry, Benita, I was saving you for last. So we have our Member of Parliament here as well for Port Moody Coquitlam, Benita Zarillo. And Benita, did you? And we know it's a busy time coming up for Benita, but did you want to say just a couple of words about the importance of trees to our communities?
Thank you. It's just so nice to see an absolute packed and full house tonight. So thank you to Chief Ed Hall. Where did I see you there, Chief? I was looking for your hat. Thank you so much. So wonderful to be here with you on the unceded traditional territory of the Coquitlam. So about the trees, we're going to have a wonderful night tonight. Every time I come, I learn a lot. We know that federally, we have a lot of work to do onto planting the trees that they said were going to be planted, but at the same time we know that we're coming into a federal election which is going to be very much about development. About development. So I really just ask folks to really think about how our communities, we have so much to lose, as a chief mentioned to us today, we have so much to lose, how our community can really be focused on sending those messages to Ottawa that we care about the trees. I'm sure all of you saw on the news just this week about the reduction in birds. How many in here do the bird count? Yeah, I thank you so much for that. The bird count reduction is really, really scary. And if we think about the heat domes, the fact that we have so much concrete in Coquitlam, I think there's lots we can tell our government. So many of you might know that I brought forward a motion on the Fraser River estuary. Everything kind of stems from the biofilm that is in the estuary all the way up the mountains and to the bears that are up on Burke. So I just want to make a call here that, you know, I know my colleague Laura Dupont, people know her very much from her city council work around trees. I was the city councillor that talked about expanding our tree canopy before those conversations were happening. It's only because of folks like you that this kind of work gets done. It's the pressure that comes from community. So I want to raise my hands to all of you today, to you Nancy, and to, I know James is going to be talking later too. We need to keep our trees for so many reasons, and we are the microcosm of why, and I want that information to get out to Ottawa. I'll be bringing it myself, hopefully soon, or continue to, and hope Laura Dupont will join me in that journey. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you so much, Benita, for that. I'm going to just lay out how our workshop is going to work tonight. First of all, we're going to start off with some presentations. The first presentation will look at some of the challenges around tree equity. Our second presentation will look at a range of native and non-native tree species that you can plant out in your own little part of the urban forest. And then our third presentation is going to talk about how to make sure that your landscapes can thrive and endure all of the challenges that climate change is going to throw at us. So just for the sake of time management, I'm going to ask if you can hold on to all your good questions, and we should hopefully have a bit of time at the end. We have a fully packed night, so if we do run a little bit over time, I hope you'll understand, and if you have to leave, we won't be offended. But I just want to tell you about the second part of the workshop, which might just entice you to stay. So trees. We have tree, plant, and compost giveaways. So if you signed up for a tree, you can pick it up in the foyer on the way out. And if you haven't signed up for one, go to the Coquitlam, City of Coquitlam table out there and they'll help you out. If you're interested in compost, you need a ticket. And if you don't have a ticket, then you again go and see the folks at the table out in the foyer and they'll help you out and direct you on that. So I'd also like to say a huge thanks to the City of Coquitlam for really stepping up and offering free trees to every participant as well as free compost. So we also have a wide range of hand-selected plants that are good for gardens of any size. They were picked out by James. Thanks for doing all the hard work on that. And we would really like to express our gratitude again to Nature Canada for making that possible. So our goal tonight is to make sure that nobody goes home empty-handed. So we really want you to be able to take the information and the materials that you get from tonight's workshop and take them home and start contributing to building the urban forest in your own neighborhood. You should also have a handout, and on the handout it has a list of the trees, all the trees that James will cover tonight. There's a lot of good resource materials in there, and there's also an advocacy ask that we'll talk about later. So you may know a little bit about the groups that are putting on tonight's workshop, but we would also like to know a little bit about you. So I'm wondering if you can just raise your hand if you are here as part of a garden club. Wow, we've got some gardeners out there. How about environmental groups? Excellent. Are there any educators? Oh, we've got lots of educators here. Is there any faith-based groups? Awesome. How about landscapers, arborists, or people that work in the tree business, so to speak? Okay. Healthcare workers. So thank you all for being here. And are there any people out there that just love nature and would love to see us all have a healthy urban forest? That's wonderful. So I think what we've just kind of showed is that we have such a diverse group of people in this room tonight, but that we're all united by our love of nature and our desire to see a healthy urban forest in our own communities. So I really am grateful for you all being here tonight. So I'm going to jump right in with our first presentation. Ooh, I'm always happy when that works. We're going to talk about tree equity. How many of you are familiar with that term, tree equity? Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of learning tonight. So this photo, I think, gives you a really good sort of gut level feel for what tree equity is. If you look at the bottom part of the photo, it's got some widely spaced big homes, lots of room around them, some big trees, big healthy tree canopy. It looks like it might be a nice place to live, right? But then you look next door, and the neighborhood right adjacent to it, the homes or the dwellings are much more tightly packed. There's a lot more impermeable surfaces, and there's not many trees. So we're going to talk tonight about the consequences of that tree inequity. And let's just start by defining it so we all know what we're talking about here. So tree equity is the fair and just distribution of tree canopy in urban areas. And it ensures that all communities and neighborhoods, regardless of race, age, or socioeconomic status, have equal access to the benefits provided by urban forests. So we all know what the next question is, right? What are those benefits? And I know a lot of you know them, but I still think that it's worth talking about a little bit. So we're heading towards summer, and I think the first thing we should maybe talk about is the cooling effect of urban trees. So how many of you remember that heat dome we had in 2021? It was pretty brutal, right? Sadly, 619 people in British Columbia lost their lives as a result of that heat dome. And the report on extreme heat deaths identified that a disproportionate number of those people lived in urban areas with low greening. So this means they lived in areas where there was a lot of pavement and asphalt, a lot of, there was more dense buildings, some of them multi-story. All of these things are absorbing and reflecting heat and stopping the flow of air. And so what happens when there's no cooling, protective urban forest there, cooling through shading and evapotranspiration, those temperatures rise. And some of those temperatures rose by 12 degrees Celsius. And that rise in temperature was determined to contribute to the increased heat-related mortality and also morbidity. So anybody suffering from heart disease or diabetes, multiple sclerosis, a number of different diseases, these are all exacerbated by high temperatures. So how about atmospheric rivers? And we all love talking about that. Now we have bomb cyclones, right? So we're seeing more extreme rainfall events. And we've had a few of those lately, and they can lead to surface runoff and localized flooding. We've seen some landslides just yesterday in Port Coquitlam. So once again, urban trees can really help us out with this. When those great huge raindrops come splashing out of the sky and they're intercepted by a tree canopy, that canopy shatters those raindrops into very tiny little droplets that can gently run down the tree and be absorbed into the permeable surface below the tree. And the roots have been working hard, making little pockets all through the soil, so the water can be held there like little reservoirs, and the tree can use it when it needs it. And up to 30% of the water that comes out from the sky doesn't even make it to the ground. It's held in that tree canopy until it can gently evaporate back into the atmosphere. And trees are natural air filters, so they're really, really good at filtering out particulate matter, smoke out of smoky skies. Again, it gets all caught up in the canopy and in the furrows of the bark sometimes. And on the underside of the leaves, there's little openings called stomates, and that's kind of where the leaf breathes, the gas exchange. And sometimes gaseous pollutants can be taken up into those leaves, and then they're held safely within the compartments and the tissues of the tree. or they're even broken down into non-toxic compounds. So, you know, that's a pretty big, lot of work that those trees are doing. And then, of course, we should talk about stress, right? Because who isn't stressed these days, right? When we walk on a busy city street, our brains perceive this as a very dangerous environment. So it elicits this fight or flight response. We're on high alert, right? But when we walk under the canopies of the trees, our blood pressure drops, our stress levels drop, our cortisol levels drop, and we feel more relaxed. And trees support social cohesion, which that kind of sounds like a funny one, right? But if you think about it, you can actually do an experiment yourself. If you're walking down a hot city street in the summer, it's busy, the traffic's blaring, tons of people, how often do people stop and greet each other? Hey, it's a great day to be walking out here on this hot, concrete concretey sidewalk with the noise of the cars honking and all these people crowding us. Never, right? Never happened to me, anyways. But if you walk, as soon as you walk under trees, it's a totally different response. It's like, hi, it's a great day to be out here. And we respond differently to each other. And we're also physically more active just when we're in beautiful surroundings. So trees reduce the rates of cardiac disease, strokes, and asthma, and I think that's simply because of all the other good things that we just talked about that trees do for us. And then we haven't even talked about, increasing biodiversity. All the Burke Mountain Naturalists here, the birds, they need those trees, and the insects to feed the birds, and John Saremba's here somewhere. What about the bats? And Jim, they need those trees as well. The pollinators, for James. So the trees are producing oxygen, they're taking up carbon dioxide, sequestering carbon, buffering out noise, stopping erosion. They're doing so much. But we could go on all night about that. So we will move on. We get back to talking about tree equity. So the proportion or the magnitude of all those wonderful things that trees do is directly related to both the extent and the health, the quality of that tree canopy. So it's not a linear relationship. If the tree canopy is bigger, we have this exponential relationship. So you get exponentially more benefits with a bigger tree canopy. So when those big trees are getting cut down and you're told to settle down because you're getting 2 trees replanted, you're not going to get a 2-for-1 deal. Don't let them fool you, because the trees that are planted are oftentimes smaller, fastigiate varieties, or even if they're the same species, it takes decades to get back to giving what a mature, healthy tree all the benefits that it would give us. Trees are also not equally distributed throughout neighborhoods, and we know that just by walking through neighborhoods, right? We can tell when there's not enough trees. And in general, it's the low income or the racialized communities that usually have less tree cover. And therefore, they're getting fewer of these benefits. And also, I think we have to be cognizant of the rate of development and the risk of creating new zones of inequity simply through the fact that there's just no tree canopy there. So, municipalities have usually been the entities that we look towards to ensure that we have a healthy tree, urban forest, and tree equity. And they do this by ensuring that there's tree bylaws in place, ensuring that there's urban forest management plans, climate action plans, both of which are really important visioning documents. They require a lot of public input to be done properly, to do a good job on them. We need to know what that canopy coverage is now and have a goal, what we're striving to see it be in the future. And then you have to fund the urban forestry department to make sure that that good work can be done. Port Moody has all those pieces in place. They have a really good urban forest management plan, and I really encourage you to read it. They have so much good information there, and it's part of your resource. So if we go on to Port Coquitlam, they have an urban forest document and a climate action document that they will post to their website, hopefully by the end of summer. Coquitlam has done some really good work, and their urban forest management plan and climate action plan are in the works, and we're really looking forward to seeing a draft of that come out soon. So there's lots of work to be done, and as Dave just mentioned, things are changing quickly, and we're losing a lot of trees. So one of the things that we have to really watch is where we're losing those trees. And those high-level canopy coverage numbers, they're helpful, we need to know them, right? But in order to know where we need to plant the trees at the most priority, we have to drill right down to the neighborhood level. So Burke Mountain has actually published their tree equity maps. And what it shows is the gap between what the tree canopy is now and what we would like to see it be, and then weighted by a whole bunch of factors. So weighting in like population over 65 and under 14, visible minorities, people living below the poverty line, heat, all those things are factored in, and we get this tree equity score. And the lower the tree equity score, you can see the dark red spots there, that means there's a greater priority that needs to be given to planting trees in those areas. So Port Moody has identified Glen Eyre and Moody Centre as areas which need to have more trees or need to be prioritized for tree planting. But as Dave mentioned, these things change really quickly, so it's important to keep this data updated. It would look a little bit different today probably if we went back and did those tree equity maps. So we don't have that data for all of the Tri-Cities, and a lot of the information right now is anecdotal. There is this rule that has been put out called the 330-300 rule, and how many of you have heard of this? Good, so a few folks out there. This says that you should be able to see 3 trees from every home, 3 big trees, substantial trees. You should have a minimum of 30% canopy coverage in every neighborhood, and each home should be within 300 meters from a park or a green space. So basically, you should be able to walk to your nearest park. This rule was developed by a world-renowned urban forest researcher, Cecil Kaneinendijk, and it's now become a globally accepted standard to measure tree equity. And Cecil is aware of the work that our group does with respect to the urban forest, and he's also aware of our workshop tonight. So he couldn't be here, but he did send his greetings, and I'm going to try and share those with you now.
Hello, my dear friends of the Wonderous Tree Fellowship. I'm very excited to send you a little greeting, actually from Johannesburg, South Africa, where I'm at the moment for the African Forum on Urban Forest. And also here it's very clear that we have to work even harder to keep our cities, our communities green, to make sure those big trees stay in our communities and provide the climate, the health, the biodiversity benefits, and all the other good things they do for us. So I'm really excited to be talking about, among others, the 330-300 rule. You can see it here behind me, the visualization, and I hope to have a chance in the near future to see you again. So keep up the wonderful work for our urban forest, for urban trees, for especially also those tree people connections that are so essential for everything we do. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
So that was Cecil Kaneinendijk, and I think he just stressed that it's not a problem just here in the Tri-Cities, it's global. We're losing our urban forests, and it's a big problem. Our cities are going to heat up and become less livable if we don't really watch and take action now. So why can't we have beautiful urban forests everywhere? Seems like a no-brainer, but there are a lot of challenges to getting tree equity, and some of those challenges begin right at the urban planning and decision making and zoning areas. So if we have urban planning right at that stage, it can lead to disparities in tree cover, with more affluent neighborhoods getting bigger lots, able to have more trees, bigger trees, more space for trees. Whereas areas zoned for higher density, there tends to be more impermeable or less permeable space and less space for trees, right? Ironically, with urban planning, it's not a simple, straightforward thing, because it can go the other way as well, and we can end up with something called green gentrification. And we actually had Lorian Nesbitt come out from UBC to talk to us at one of the urban forest workshops. And what happens sometimes is we see these areas that are just, there's no trees and they're really not nice areas to live. And so we try to green them up, put in parks and trees and make them beautiful. Suddenly they become these really desirable places to live. And what happens? The price goes up. And then the folks that have been living there, the long-term, low-income folks, get priced right out of their own homes. So there's lots of nuances around it and lots of challenges to deal with there. And I think we all know that trees are not always included at the planning stage, right? How often have we seen trees come down, lots just being clear-cut? Because it's easier and more cost-efficient to do it that way for developers. And I think we have to understand that it's unreasonable to expect to keep all the trees with above and below ground infrastructure and densification. But I don't think that cutting down all the trees should be the default, because we know once those big trees go, we're not getting them back. So we need to move away from this develop first, plant second kind of mentality and make sure the trees are included and integrated right in at the planning stage. And we all know, and I think Derek might touch on this a little bit more in his presentation, how difficult it is to grow trees in an urban area. We're already asking so much of them, right? We're asking them to grow in polluted, droughty, soil compacted areas with, they get damaged and there's some crazy pruning going on out there. So those trees are already really struggling, and areas with lower incomes have less resources to manage those trees. So we have to make sure that when cities go in and plant those beautiful trees there, that they're properly maintained so they don't become viewed as messy or hazardous. And then of course we always are looking for funding. We need to make sure that these things are properly funded, long-term and sustainable funding, and that there needs to be public outreach so that when projects go into communities, that we have buy-in from folks. And also, I think trees are too often seen as a nice to have, right? They're sometimes the last thing, to think about, and they fall off the table when budgets get tight. But I think we need to change that and look at them more as a necessity. Like, we would expect to have clean air and clean water for all residents. And I think we need to include urban forests, healthy urban forests in there as well. So, should we be holding our municipalities accountable for our urban forests? I would say absolutely yes. But I want to throw another layer of complexity over everything. And we are right now in a little bit of a housing crunch. How many of you know somebody who's not able to afford to buy a house in Metro Vancouver? Wow. So almost everybody knows somebody in that position. So the province viewed that as a big problem. So they implemented some legislation, and specifically bills 44 and 47, which mandates increased densification for all communities over 5,000, which of course includes us. And so it was done with the intent to make sure that everybody had a home. But the issue was that there was no parallel protection for the urban forest put in place when that was done. So, here we see some big challenges here. And municipalities already found it challenging to find that balance between, development and retaining a healthy urban forest. So things just got a whole lot more complicated. Tree bylaws, the scope has been reduced, and the ability of municipalities to look at their neighbourhood planning, all this decades of planning that went into visioning what our community should look like, has a less scope now, less teeth. And in the short term, we're witnessing municipalities really struggling to try and get all these new requirements in place, and sometimes resources have been maybe siphoned away from some of the urban forest work that needs to be done. And I think the TCAF group has done a lot of work, talking to elected representatives about this, and have identified some gaps of concern. And one of the things is worrying about losing our urban forest canopy. And once trees are coming out faster than we can replace them and regrow them. And once we lose all those benefits, we're going to start seeing an increase in the urban heat island effect. So our cities will heat up. And we're going to see an increase in impermeable surfaces. So we'll see more, potential flooding and possible pollution loading into our fish-bearing streams and rivers. We need those trees and that permeable surface. And it can take decades for a new tree to replace, the benefits of a mature tree when it comes down. And the mandated density just really could create new areas of tree inequity if we don't manage it very carefully. So there's lots and lots of challenges ahead of us. And if we wonder, so if this is the status quo, if this is the way it's going to be, where are we going to grow our tree canopy? And I think again we have to look to our municipalities to take some of that on. Look to them to plant in the parks and also to plant street trees, especially in those areas that really are lacking in trees right now. City of Coquitlam has done a really good job in planting trees. A year or so ago, I think 10,000 trees went out. We're seeing a lot of trees coming down, but at least there's this attempt to try and balance it a little bit. And I think we can also look towards incentives, planting in your own backyard, right? And again, all of the Tri-Cities have done that and giving tree giveaways and trying to encourage people to grow their own little piece of the urban forest. And I think that's what we're hoping to do tonight. The City of Coquitlam being really stepped up to offer free trees to everybody in compost so that you can go home and do that. And I think one of the areas that has been kind of overlooked are schoolyards. And I think those are ideal places to build and enhance our urban forest, because research shows increasingly that there are benefits ranging from physical health, mental well-being, and cognitive development even, when kids play under the canopy of big trees. And playing in the forest and in nature has been shown to reduce anxiety and to potentially even mitigate ADHD symptoms, to increase focus, reduce impulsivity. What a wonderful thing to give our children. So, do it for the kids, right? And sometimes the school's the only setting that kids have to be in nature. So, when we look at all this, it's really complicated, and I apologize, I know I'm throwing tons of information out there, but whose responsibility is tree equity? It's one of those political footballs. We look out our windows, we see the trees coming down, we say, phone the mayor, phone council, right? It's the municipality, and the municipality can say, it's not us, we actually really love those trees. It's the province has mandated this new density requirement. And the province can look to the federal government and say, you know what, we just want to make sure everybody has a home. There's not enough houses here. And you're bringing people into our communities without us having the infrastructure. And then the federal government can look right back at us and say, hey Canada, look at you, you're an aging population. We need to bring people in for the workforce. So whose responsibility is it? I say it's everybody's responsibility. We all have a role to play in this. And if we just look at, some of the things that we can do, there are things we can do. So again, we look to our municipalities for some of this to ensure that trees are a core part of municipal land use policy. Although some of these tools have been limited, like tree bylaws, municipalities can still protect urban, environmentally sensitive areas. And there's also a legislative amendment that's been brought into this new housing regulations, and it allows for some flexibility to encourage space for trees and landscaping through city zoning bylaws. So there are tools there in place, although they are challenging sometimes to implement. We need to get our cities acquiring land for parks and green spaces, not for now, but for the future. And I think there's a couple of folks in the audience tonight possibly who are doing just that. They're advocating for increased park space in our cities, because it's going to get rarer and more valuable as we densify. All of our cities, I think, are developing tree inventories and tree equity mapping, things that are really important tools to make sure that we're getting trees where they need to be, and then responding to that and making sure those trees do go in. And incentivizing tree planting. We're doing that again by getting those trees, free tree giveaways, and that could probably be expanded as well in other incentivizations. And then also there needs to be some advocacy, I think, to the provincial level, asking for some provincial level forest policy to either reinstate full authority to municipalities to implement their tree bylaws, or to amend the community charter to specify a minimum canopy coverage targets for the urban forest and put that as part of the municipal government's powers, put it back within their power. And I think the provincial government also needs to commit to reviewing this new housing legislation and just to make sure that it really does meet the requirements, that we are getting climate resilient housing and that we are protecting biodiversity. And if there are amendments that need to be made, let's do that before it's too late. So in raising awareness and promoting education, I think, again, Coquitlam with your Tree Spree program do a wonderful job. Free guided tree walks for everybody. And also, workshops like tonight. So trying to get, a little bit of some of this information out. So I think I'm just gonna leave it here and let's wrap up with some words from Nature Canada. And they say, when a community fails to ensure tree equity, they fail to serve all of its members, leaving already marginalized people at a disadvantage. So addressing tree equity is not just about fairness, it's about building healthier, happier, and safer communities for everyone. So thank you so much for listening. I know that was a lot to put on your shoulders right at the beginning here. I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. I always like to start with a slightly incriminating slide here. So, some of you may know James as the Green Man. And for those of you who were at our backyard ecology event last year, you might recognize him as the Leaf Thief. And that's because James is a big fan of mulching. So, anyways, James has 30 years experience as a red-heeled seal horticulturist with a special interest in creating nature-friendly gardens. He's a member of the Burke Mountain Naturalists and a founding member of Wonderous Tree Fellowship. So please join me in welcoming James.
There we go. Okay, it's looking good. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Great crowd. We're really delighted to see everyone out here tonight. It just shows how much we love trees, how much we care about our urban forests. Nancy's covered it pretty well. All the reasons why we need to keep our urban forests, some of the challenges that we've had. So I won't do too much time on that. But I will say that I'm going to talk tonight about a lot of the really wonderful, beautiful, and diversity of trees that we can use in our urban landscapes, and especially during challenging times. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you a bit more bad news. Sorry about this, but yeah, climate change. Of course, we all know, no surprise, it's upon us. The scientists, biologists have been warning us for years. But it's here, and it's created some extra set of challenges. It's never been easy to be an urban tree. Really the cities that we build are in most cases, are really hostile environments for trees, and they are nothing like the original home woodland of these trees and the original place that they came from. So, like Nancy said, we're asking a lot of our trees, and especially now with drought. Long periods of drought that we haven't seen before. We get a little bit of rain, but we go, several months now with just not enough rain. And sadly, what's happening, of course, is that a lot of our native trees are just not able to handle it. They're not able to adjust and adapt quickly enough to the changes. And unfortunately, here we have a really good example. And I think we've all seen this out in our forests here. We've got some beautiful big red cedars that have been declining for many years. And now they're finally packing it in, which is just a really sad thing to see. We see the same thing with our native hemlocks as well, our tsuga trees as well. And they are really struggling and they're dying off a lot as well. So some big challenges there. Pollution, of course. As much as we'd like to say things are improving, our emissions are still going up right now. Our carbon emissions still causing issues. We're building out, of course, expanding our cities, our road structures, our highways. There's more cars on the road now than there used to be. And this again creates a lot of great challenges for our urban trees. And of course, severe storms. We're getting a lot more severe storms, of course, atmospheric rivers like Nancy was talking about. Of course, this creates another challenge. We have trees that have already been weakened by drought. Now you throw on an atmospheric river, saturated soils, and a heavy wind, and these trees are coming down, so we're losing a lot of our trees that way. Heat. The heat dome, of course, of 2021, and I know where I worked, we had a beautiful big yew hedge. And on the south side of that hedge, where it's exposed to the sunlight, in a matter of a couple of days, it was entirely scorched. It was completely brown on one side of the hedge. And I had never seen that happen in the 30 years of horticulture that I've been involved with. So it was a bit alarming and a bit shocking, as we all know. Pest infestation, and this all goes hand in hand, of course. We can all probably remember a number of years ago, the big, huge outbreak of mountain pine beetle. That actually devastated lodgepole pines all through the Caribou area. Manning Park also got hit really hard. And of course, this was a result of these warmer winters. You know, we don't get the cold temperatures for long enough periods of time to kill off these beetles overwintering. Along with fire suppression that we were actually too good at one time. Large stands of trees were just devastated by this beetle. And now, of course, a little more bad news. It looks like that we've seen some evidence of the emerald ash borer in British Columbia now, which is very alarming, of course, because it'll attack a beetle that will attack these the ash trees. So when I look at all of this, two words really come to mind when I think about how we deal with this and what we're going to do, and I think that is diversity is one word, and of course because. Especially when it comes to pest infestations, the more diversity we can have in our urban forests, the better it's going to be, because a lot of these diseases and pests are target specific. They attack one or two certain species. So if we have a great diversity of plants in our urban forests, we're not going to get hit as hard. It's an advantage we have in urban forests as opposed to natural woodland forests, where we don't have any other choices. We have to go with our native trees and plants. So we can adapt to that. So diversity is one thing, and of course the second word that really comes to mind is resilience. We've got to start choosing trees that are resilient, choosing trees that are well positioned, well suited for the needs that we have. And again, it's very challenging in urban environments, but if we choose the right trees, plant them in the right places, we can have beautiful, lush, very successful urban forests. So let's look at a few of our trees, and we're going to start off with some pollution-tolerant trees. So this first one here is Platanus X Hispanica, also known as London Plane. It doesn't sound very English, but also known sometimes as X acerifolia, Platanus acerifolia as well. Leaves are very much like a maple tree, so acerifolia. So for those of you who don't know that much about trees and you're not really familiar with the industry, when you see an X like this, it means that there's been a cross. They've crossed two species, usually very similar, and they come up with a hybrid, basically. And so the London Plane is a hybrid tree, and this goes way back, probably around the 1600s. Two of these trees obviously were planted maybe a little too close together, and the London Plane was born. And they call it the London Plane because it was planted extensively through the city of London. Thousands of these trees were planted. And because they found that this tree actually had a really good resistance to air pollution. And so you can imagine, by the 1700s, they were planting these trees all over many big cities in Europe, actually. And you can imagine coal burning, that was the height of the Industrial Revolution. And they would be burning coal in all the factories, burning coal in fireplaces, and the air quality and particulate matter must have just been absolutely dreadful. You can imagine what that must have been like. But the London plane has a sort of a bit of a secret weapon here. And you can see the bark on this tree. And it's a peeling bark. It's very, it can exfoliate. So when all that soot and all that pollution gathers up on the bark of the tree, it can exfoliate that bark and actually be able to clean itself and purify itself. And of course, we know the leaves of these trees are very good at collecting particulate matter as well. And of course, naturally, the advantage with deciduous trees is they drop their leaves in the fall and get rid of those pollutants that way as well. So this is a big tree. It's a real giant, actually, 70 feet to 100 feet at times it can grow. But it is a really, really good, solid tree. We have a lot of them in our urban environments. If you go down to the west side of Vancouver, you'll see these trees all along as street trees. Beautiful big shade trees. And these are the types of canopy trees that we really need to give us those targets for our canopy cover. So, really valuable tree. Drought tolerant as well. It can take the drought well, which is great, and also it can handle a lot of compaction, so which is also important in an urban tree. So soil compaction it can handle as well. And I think we have here's a picture of a nice little group of them that I took a picture of in Richmond here. And you can just imagine how nice and cool and inviting that looks, right? I mean, that looks like a beautiful spot to be. I wouldn't mind living there, that's for sure. Next tree. Yes, the dawn redwood. One of my favorite trees for sure. It's my favorite botanical name for sure. Metasequoia glyptostroboides. That's a beauty, that one for sure. But you can't talk about this tree without talking a little bit about the history of this tree, because it's just so fascinating. To begin with, it's a deciduous conifer. There aren't many of those. There's only a handful of deciduous conifers. So just like a conifer, it has these little beautiful soft green needles, produces cones, but then it also drops all its leaves in the fall. And you can see there's a gorgeous picture there of a really beautiful bronzy orange color of this tree. So a really beautiful fall color. And of course, when you look at the bark, this is a very old tree, picture that I took in Beacon Hill Park. And this tree, of course, with the fluting and the sort of deep grooves that it gets in the trunk, it's a really attractive tree as well. But it goes way back, this tree. It was also sometimes called a living fossil because it was believed to be extinct. We didn't think there was any of these trees around. There was only fossil evidence of these trees until about 1944. And that's when a grove of these trees were discovered in a very remote part of China. And I mean, this was huge, huge news in the botanical world. And soon enough, plant breeders, they grabbed all the seeds from these and distributed them to botanical gardens around the world. And now we have these trees growing in temperate zones all around the world now. The lineage of this tree is fascinating. It goes back 240 million years. Very, very old tree indeed, and it hasn't really changed a bit. So you can tell that obviously this tree's been through some climate change. It's seen a lot. It's managed to survive. It even survived the dinosaurs. And here it is today. We still have this tree, which is absolutely amazing. So great pollution tolerance of this tree. It's got a fair amount of drought tolerance, but it can also take fairly damp soils. So it can grow in a wide variety of different soils. And I think I said drought tolerant as well, I think already. So that makes it a very special tree. And just out of interest's sake, you know, at one time, about 100 million years ago, we had a tree almost identical to this. It was called Metasequoia occidentalis. And this tree, basically identical to the tree we see here, was actually a predominant tree in our forests, actually right through all parts of Canada, right up to the north. So it was a very, very different time, different climate back then, but it's interesting to think that these trees once inhabited our local forests of British Columbia. And here is another one. This is another amazing tree that goes back over 200 million years, the ginkgo biloba. Now, this picture here is a cultivar, Princeton Century, and it's much, much smaller. I should have mentioned the dawn redwood is again a very large tree. You can get to 70, 80, maybe 90 feet in height, so it's a very big tree. But this one here is a very compact, very narrow growing tree. It only gets about 40 feet in height and about 15 feet across, so it's definitely a tree that you can plant in your yard, especially if you don't have a lot of space and you have a narrow maybe in between houses. You know, this tree would work really well. And again, very drought tolerant. Just a very tough tree, and it also is adaptable to road salt as well. So we see these used in medians in cities quite a bit because they're just that tough a tree. And of course, the regular color of this tree is a nice rich mid-green color. This is the fall color. Ginkgos are known for their beautiful golden color, so definitely a tree that's worth planting. And yes, it's true. All trees can't be Conor McDavids. They're not all big stars. This is a very small little Yucca pine. But when we talk about urban forests, we have to remember it's not just the big canopy trees we're talking about. We're also talking about the understory. All these smaller shrubs, ground covers, all make up the canopy cover, and they all make up the urban forest. So it's all an important part. And anyone who's been in landscaping, any horticulturist here will know that this is a real go-to, very, very tough pine. It ticks all the boxes for toughness here, drought tolerance, pollution tolerance, salt tolerance as well. But you know, they don't have to be boring. And this little one here, Winter Gold, is a cultivar of the Yucca pine. And on the right-hand side there, that's the summer. It's a beautiful, rich green color in the summer. But in the winter, it actually turns a real golden yellow. And the picture here doesn't do it justice. We just didn't translate well from the cell phone to the slideshow here. But it's a real, rich, beautiful gold. And you can imagine what that would look like with some beautiful purple heathers through the wintertime. Yeah, it's a really nice tree. So something to consider. And also, we talked about pollution and about how not only they tolerate pollution, but how some trees will actually absorb pollution. And it's the evergreen trees that actually do the best job at actually taking in the harmful gases, you know, like the nitrogen dioxide and the sulfur dioxide. They can absorb that through their needles, through their foliage. And the trees that do that the very best are the pine trees. So the pines are trees that we definitely want to have in our urban environment. Yew trees are actually very good at doing that as well. Now this is a tree that I have to admit, I'm not all that familiar with. We don't see many hackberries in the area here. Celtis occidentalis. It's a tree that's native to the eastern part of North America as well as the central part of North America. So right away you can tell it's got a really good cold tolerance for sure. But it sounds like a bit of a miracle tree, and we might be seeing more of this tree because it can tolerate a wide range of soils: sandy soil, clay soils, all kinds of very poor soils. Again, pollution tolerant and drought tolerant as well. So it sounds like a really, really tough tree. And of course, it also has a nature value as well. It produces these little cherry-like fruits here, dark purple in color, that appear in the late summer and carry on right through the winter time. So they provide excellent forage for birds as well. So valuable in that sense too. And just a very attractive, quirky sort of bark that it has on its trunk there. So it's an attractive tree. And it gets to about 40 to 60 feet in height, I would say. So tree that it's probably a great street tree, great city tree. But probably the most fascinating thing about this tree altogether is that it actually belongs to the cannabis family. Yeah, I mean, who would have guessed? It was formerly a member of the elm family, but they decided now that it's a part of the cannabis family. Which got me thinking, how did they figure that out? This is strictly for research purposes. Sadly, I can tell you that it's actually more closely related to the hemp family than it is to sativa. Anyway, there you go. Getting serious once again, we're going to the red oak. Now the oaks, a lot of the oaks are fantastic trees. We do plant a lot of them in the cities. We see a lot of red oaks, Quercus rubra, popular tree. But a lot of the other oaks are really good as well. Oaks are interesting because they have a very deep root zone. And because of that, it's able to source water very deep into the soil. So very resilient, drought tolerance there, great fall color as well. And again, big tree, really 50 feet in height to maybe 70 feet. But the real important part is the width of the canopy, 60 feet it can grow to, which is, again, it's going to do a lot of wonderful shading for us. So it's a great tree to keep planting, for sure. But of course, again, for residential people, that might be just too big a tree to plant. So of course, there are some other options in the oak families here as well. And Crimson Spider is a cross, actually, between the English oak, Quercus roadwork, and the white oak, Quercus alba. It goes about 40-45 feet, and again, very narrow growing, so it's a great, if you have a lot of space, it's a great one to plant, about 15 feet across. And very similar in a lot of ways is Quercus palustris, green color. But the added advantage with this tree is it's also known as the Spanish swamp oak. And that means, of course, that it can actually handle quite a bit of moisture, quite a bit of moist soil. And it can even handle periodic flooding as well. So when we talk about atmospheric rivers, and if you have a yard that floods occasionally, this is a tree that you might want to try. And one of my favorite golden leaf trees, the Robinia pseudoacacia freesia. It's a tree, I like it a lot. I know some people don't really care for this trail that much, but no denying it's absolutely gorgeous. Leaves on these pinnate leaves, beautiful architecturally gorgeous tree. Gets to about 40 feet in height. You can see this one growing in a parking lot, so again, it's a tough tree. You take the drought tolerance, and again, it is salt resistant as well. This one will perhaps produce flowers. It's in the pea family, or Yuna Fahim, Fabaceae. And some of these white flowers, these creamy white flowers, are scented. It doesn't produce a lot of flowers, but it's really pretty when they do. A word of caution though. The straight species, Robinia pseudoacacia, is one to be avoided. We don't want to plant that one. It's a bit of an invasive tree. It'll sucker from the roots, and it's got all kinds of nasty spikes on the suckers as well. So keep that in mind. And another thing to keep in mind is that it is a poisonous tree. But we live with a lot of poisonous plants. But if you do have a dog or anyone who eat those sort of leaves in your yard, then you probably don't want to plant that. This is a great tree, the Persian ironwood, very aptly named. It is native to Iran and the Caspian Sea area. And ironwood, because this is one of the trees with the actually hardest and heaviest wood of all the trees. So very aptly named. I really like this tree a lot. It's one of my favorites. It's a great street tree. And one of the reasons is because you notice it doesn't really have a dominant leader on this tree. It's very openly branched, which is terrific for planting under power lines. It's 20 to 40 feet in height. And even if you needed to prune this back, if it got a little too tall, you could prune the center out of this tree without absolutely destroying it. You never really want to top trees if you can ever help it. It's not a good thing to do. It weakens the tree. We don't want to do that. But if we absolutely have to, this would be a tree that we can kind of play with a little bit, prune. But really, it's the color that we really love the most. This is in the witch hazel family, so brilliant leaf colors. And on one tree, you can get golden colors, reds, burgundies, yellows. So it's a spectacular tree, wonderful specimen tree for the home. It's not that big a tree, so one definitely worth trying. Yeah, so plant breeders are doing what they can as well, and the sunset maples are an interesting cross. Acer truncatum, which is a maple tree native to China, which has very good heat tolerance, shows great heat tolerance, and of course Acer platanoides is crossed with this Norway maple, and that in itself a very tough maple as well. And the process, this is fairly new in the market. We haven't seen too many of these yet, but they're starting to get sold now. Pacific Sunset here is a little bit more in the orangey, sort of reddish tones, and then Urban Sunset is a rich burgundy color. Again, nice specimen tree for your yard because it only gets to about 30-35 feet. That's a pretty good size for a maple. That's pretty decent, so not too large. We should talk a little bit about our native plants, our native trees as well. The ponderosa pine. Of course, we don't really see this as a coastal tree. It really grows east of the Cascades primarily. And of course, we've all been up to the Okanagan, or at least most of us have, and I'm sure we've seen beautiful specimens up there. Gorgeous tree. And interestingly enough, up there, if you look at the bark, I find it here on the coast, it tends to be more of a brownish black color of the bark. But of course, in the interior, you get these rich orange colors in the bark and cinnamon sort of colors, deep fissured bark, and very thick bark as well. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that it has a natural fire suppression there, its ability to withstand fires. Of course, if the fires aren't too intense. And so where it comes from traditionally in the sort of grassy steppe area of the Okanagan, where forest or at least brush fires are very common, and they would sweep through, and sometimes you can see charred tree trunks where the foliage at the top is still alive. So it's able to survive fires, and that's a pretty amazing thing. Of course, pines, ponderosa pine will send out a great big deep taproot, and that's part of its ability to withstand incredible droughts, incredible dry weather, and reach very far down into the soil. And we're seeing them planted on the west coast now. It's becoming a bit more of a popular tree. This picture that I've got here with these is part of the larger grove of trees at the golf course I work at. And they're up on a bit of a hill, really good drainage, some really light sandy soil. These got to have really good drainage. It can't be sitting in any kind of wet soil. But they're growing really fine, they're growing really well. So again, as climate change hits us more, this is maybe a native tree we might be looking to plant more often on the coast. And of course the Doug fir. I'm happy to say that Douglas fir looks like it is a little more resilient. We're not seeing the same kind of dieback as we are with the hemlocks and we are with the cedar trees. So it's promising that we have these trees and they're doing well. And this picture here was from Town Center Park, just across the road here. And I'll give a shout out to the Coquitlam folks here, because that is a fantastic park. And there's so many beautiful urban trees to look at in that park. So if you want to study up on all kinds of different trees, you'll find them just over there. In an urban environment, the Douglas fir will get to probably about 100, 125 feet. Forest trees as well can get much taller, up to about 300 feet. It's a long-lived tree, up to 500 years or so. One of the other advantages of the Doug fir is that it gives off a lot of oxygen. It's one of the best trees for getting us oxygen back. So again, it's worth having in our urban environment. The one drawback and thing we have to kind of be mindful of with these is, of course, lovely sweeping branches on the young trees that we have right here. But as they get taller, they get very broad horizontal branching on this tree. And of course, windstorms and snowfall can actually snap these branches off very easily. So around homes, as a street tree, it might not be the best choice, but we definitely want to see these continue to be planted in our parks for sure. And a great food source for the Douglas squirrels and other birds as well. So it's a good environmental and nature tree as well. And look at the big chunky bark on this tree as well. I mean, it's just incredible. It would be very thick bark, and from what I understand, on the very largest of the Doug firs, that thick outer bark can be almost a foot thick. So very protective bark on this tree. And again, this is a western tree that can withstand some forest fires. So again, the bark protects the tree from fires as well. This is a really interesting tree, and it's one we're probably going to see more of. We do see them occasionally, but not that often. Callow cedars to currants, incense cedar. A lot of similarities with our red cedar with this tree, and it's, I guess, a close cousin, you might say. But this one here has the advantage of being very, very drought tolerant, where it grows from, ranges from Western Oregon all the way to California, to Baja, Mexico, to northern Baja, Mexico area. So it's got some real toughness to this tree, real good drought tolerance. And you can see by the foliage how similar it looks to the red cedar. They call it the incense cedar, of course, because of the wonderful smell of the wood and the crushed leaves as well. Very similar to the red cedar. Beautiful, beautiful oils and scent to it. Fairly narrow-growing tree, as you can see. It'll get to about 60, 70 feet in height. And the one here, I just happened to see growing in Richmond and Easton area there. And of course, it's being pruned a little bit for these telephone wires, so it would be a much fuller tree. But it's a really beautiful tree. It looks a little bit like a redwood tree, actually, when it gets mature. But definitely a good tree to see. Slow growing, so if you put one in your yard, not to worry, it's not going to grow too fast. The deodar cedar, Himalayan cedar. It's a fairly common tree. Of course, anyone growing up through the 60s and 70s, almost everyone had one of these in their yard, in their neighborhood. Trees can grow in and out of fashion, almost like clothing kind of does as well. So it was all the rage to have a deodar cedar. Deodar, the word deodar actually comes from the Sanskrit word. It actually means divine tree. Where it's native to in the Himalayas in India and the Kashmir region and the national tree of Pakistan is also. It's considered to be a very sacred tree. So a lot of sacred significance to this tree. It's a beautiful, strong, tough tree. It's one we should be growing in an urban environment, but it kind of fell out of fashion for a while. You know, it was planted a lot, like I say, in the 60s and 70s, but it kind of fell a little bit out of fashion. Maybe there was too many of them around. And Aurea, and again, the picture doesn't do it quite justice. It's beautiful golden tips to this tree. It doesn't grow quite as large as the species, which gets to about 50 feet in height. But these trees here are beautiful ones to try, and this gorgeous little feeling blue is a very dwarf variety. And that is exactly how it looks. It's actually a beautiful frosty blue color on the foliage. And great for small spaces, rock gardens, xeriscaping, perfect little tree for that. Only gets to a few feet high, but it will spread over rocks for quite a distance, and beautiful little tree. And giant redwood, a spectacular tree, of course. Now, a lot of people would argue that this really isn't an urban tree. It's just far too large. And this is a massive tree. And again, I just happened to see this one when I was driving through the area of Steveston, and I had to go measure this tree. So I took out my measuring tape, and the neighbors were kind of looking out the window, and I snuck up and sort of gave them a wave and measured the tree. They didn't seem to mind. But 18 feet around the circumference on this tree, so spectacular big tree. And I would argue that, well, yeah, it is a pretty good urban tree. I mean, it's flourishing where it is. It's right along the roadside here. It's not doing any harm. It's not pushing up the sidewalks or the driveways here. And you can see that there's an old house there beside it, probably built in the late 60s, maybe 70s. And the one on the other side, there's a brand new house that just got built. So you can see around this time, the 60, 70, or 70, sort of 50, 60 year mark for houses, they're all starting to get torn down now. And of course, we're putting larger houses or condo developments. But how long will those last for? Another 60, 70 years perhaps? But in reality, this tree here could live for hundreds of years. And in the wild, of course, they live for over 1,000 years. So when you think about it, what's the more important infrastructure we've got here? Maybe it's the tree. You know, maybe it's the infrastructure, the tree green infrastructure. We have to start thinking about our trees as valuable green infrastructure, not just large trees. It's a very stable tree. Nature's design with this beautiful pyramidal form. And the way this tree forms actually gives it a wonderful buffering ability from strong winds. The way that the denseness of those branches will deflect the strong winds. Very stable tree. I've never seen one of these fall over. It's more likely to die standing up than to fall over. So a really safe tree, and we shouldn't be afraid of these trees. And the one thing we want to talk about as well, when you look at a tree like this, I thought, well, this would be interesting. So there's an app, of course, that you can get, several different apps. So there's a site you can go to called My Tree. And you can look up this tree, or any tree you want, really. You just put in your address, and it'll ask you some information about what tree species it is. You need to know that. You need to know how wide around it is, on the diameter or circumference of the tree. And you put all that in, and condition of the tree, and it will spit out all this really cool information about the services that this tree provides. You know, you can't replace a tree like this, but you can put a price on the benefits that this tree provides. And looking at this tree over a 20-year period, the services are worth somewhere around $1,400 worth of services. About 40.5 kilos of carbon dioxide are sequestered by this tree over 20 years. Electricity savings of $618, which equates to about 2,806 kilowatt hours of energy. So providing shade, you know, you're not going to have to fire up the air conditioner. And the one that really stood out to me was stormwater mitigation. And Nancy touched on that and how important that is. And incredible, over 20 years, it diverts. Stormwater mitigation, runoff avoided, is 276,000 liters of water. So they do us an incredible service, and these big, big trees, and it just shows how important these big trees are in our community. So, the redwood. And of course, if you can't plant a redwood in your yard, well, here's a really nice alternative. The Serbian spruce. The Serbian spruce is the bronze. Beautiful, really tight form on this conical, very nice conical tree. Makes a great landscape Christmas tree, by the way, if you want to decorate it. I do. This is actually my yard, so I decorate this tree every year. But it's a really good, tough tree again. You see a lot of them in urban environments. They can handle the stress well. It's one definitely worth considering. We're just going to switch it up a little bit because, of course, as we all know, we're not only in a climate crisis, but we're also in a biodiversity crisis as well. And again, I think Ed might have touched on that. I know Nancy touched on that. You know, we're losing a lot of our pollinators, our insects worldwide are dropping, which means our songbirds are in trouble too. Frogs, all these other creatures that rely on insects. So we need to do whatever we can. And one of our native trees that does a fantastic job is the big leaf maple, Eastern Phyllum, and it is actually the tree in our Pacific Northwest that has the largest number of species. It hosts a large number of species out of any tree in the Pacific Northwest. So you can see in that middle picture there, it has these, well, you can't see the ridges in the bark, but it has this very ridged bark. And over time, mosses will start growing in there. The bark is very rich in calcium, so it's perfect for growing mosses and lichens. And as they develop and as they colonize the tree, they actually start to create a little bit of soil underneath that tree. And then, of course, you've got things like licorice fern that start inhabiting the tree. And even sometimes you'll see seedlings growing out of the side of the big leaf maple. And of course, wonderful flowers. And if you're a forager, these flowers are perfectly edible. And for bees, they are really, really important because the queen bees will come out early in the season, and maples provide a really wonderful, much-needed source of nectar for our local bees as well. It's a very large tree, big tree, 50, 60, 70 feet perhaps. But a bit of sad news on this tree here. I was just reading a study done by University of Washington, and they were saying that they were seeing a lot of dieback of these trees dying out. And they're attributing it directly to climate change, to the hot, dry, drought-type summers that we're having. So this tree is not adjusting well to that, so we have to keep that into consideration when we plant this tree, and it is sensitive to pollution as well. So we have to pick our spots when we plant this tree, but we should be planting it because of just all the gifts that it gives us. Service berry, of course, the one that we talked about a bit earlier. This is a wonderful native small tree or large shrub. Gets to about 15 feet tall. Really wonderful pollinator value here. Very small native bees are covered these flowers in the springtime. It's just about to come into flower now, sort of that mid to late springtime, and then of course followed by these delicious purple berries, which are wonderful for people to eat and also of course for birds to eat as well. And beautiful fall color too, so it's a great landscape tree in that sense too. Nature tree and landscape tree. Wonderful orangey yellow fall color in the native variety. And the one we have here, and it's the one that we're giving away as a gift, is Autumn Brilliance. And it's a cross between a couple of different varieties of Saskatoon berry. And, oh, by the way, Saskatoon, the word Saskatoon actually is derived from the Cree word for this tree, this berry. So the city of Saskatoon is named after this shrub, which is kind of interesting.
Do your neighbors like it?
Oh, probably. But don't let that stop you from planting. Just pick them all and eat them. Yeah, they probably do. I mean, who wouldn't like these berries? They're pretty tasty. But again, you know, we still need to plant them. They're valuable plants. Sorbus, native sorbus here. Is it Chenchus? Is it Tenchus? Oh, well, can't say it anymore here. Anyway, this is a nice little, very small mountain ash or sorbus tree here. It only gets to about 12, 15 feet. Again, great value for the birds. The cedar waxwings are particularly interested in this little tree, and of course the flowers are pollinator friendly as well. So it's one you might want to consider if you're looking for a nature type garden. And this is a real beautiful tree. Most of us are familiar with the great big horse chestnut, the European horse chestnut, great big tree. Well, they crossed that tree with the Aesculus tabia, which is the buckeye tree in the U.S., which has a really bright red flower. And the combination between the two, they came out and they got Aesculus carnea here, which is a beautiful pink flower. This tree gets to about, it's a smaller tree than the original European horse chestnut. It gets to about 30, 40 feet, maybe 50 feet. So it actually is a decent residential tree. But the real beautiful thing of these pink trusses of flowers here that are very appealing to both bumblebees, native bees, and hummingbirds will actually come to this tree as well. So a very hummingbird-friendly tree. It has pretty decent drought tolerance, not too bad. And it doesn't get the leaf blight as well, as badly as the horse chestnut gets as well. So it's a little bit more resilient, I guess, in that way as well. This is kind of a cool one, the sourwood oxydendron. It's a very small tree. It's kind of a woodland tree. It comes from eastern North America, so the Appalachian mountain areas. And it's kind of an understory tree. So this is kind of nice because it can take quite a bit of shade. So if you need a shady plant, this might be one for you. Very, very small growing, maybe 20, 30 feet max, I would think. And the nice thing, of course, is that you can see these bell-shaped flowers, these rays of these white flowers. Slightly fragrant, but really, really appealing to the bees here. And of course, you can tell by the shape of these flowers that it's in the Ericaceae family, so it's related to heathers or blueberries as well, the Ericaceae, which also means that it likes acidic soil. So good humus-rich acidic soil, reasonably good drainage, and you're away to the races. It also has great fall color, really rich red, deep crimson color in the fall. If you plant it in a sunnier location, it'll color nice for you. This is kind of an interesting one, Cornus mass, Cornelian cherry, and you looking at it, you know, it's this Cornelian cherry, but of course it's actually a dogwood. Cornus being a dogwood, so this is a European variety, native to central, sort of southeastern parts of Europe, and this tree grows here really well. In fact, the picture I took here is actually at the corner of David Chauncey Street. So there's 3 beautiful specimens growing there right now. And pollinator friendly, of course, they bloom very early in the season. They're probably just about finishing the blooming. But then they're followed by these wonderful red fruits. Perfectly edible. We can eat them, but they are very astringent and are very sour. But the birds love them. So again, really good nature-friendly plant. And actually fairly tough. They grow in rocky, sort of stony areas, forest openings, deciduous forest openings in their native habitat. So they're actually fairly tough, and one we should be planting more of. And this one here is kind of a fun one. It's not one I would recommend for parks or street trees. For example, Albizia julibrism, Persian silk tree. Again, it comes from that area of Iran and parts of China as well. But it is pollinator friendly, and the bees actually love this tree as well. And if you want a little touch of it, but it is not long lived. It's a very short-lived tree. It grows fast, but burns out kind of quick. So about 30 years is sort of the average time you're going to get out of this tree. So really not one that you would look at for the long term or for parks and streets as well. But it is a fun one to have. Japanese snowbell, Styrax japonicus. I've been saying this is a lot of it. It's my favorite tree. I say that a lot because I love all these trees. But this one really is fantastic for a nice fragrance to this tree. It's an absolute magnet for bees, both honeybees and bumblebees as well. I love this tree. Native to Japan, Korea, I think maybe parts of China as well. Grows really well here. Not a big tree, so it's a great residential tree. It only gets to maybe, 25, 30 feet max. Snow cone is a really nice tight conical form that's available on the market. So yeah, I got one of these in my backyard. This is the pictures are from my backyard here. And just love this one. So definitely one. But this one here, we talk a lot about trees that are drought tolerant. This one's going to want some moisture. Don't let it dry out for the summertime. Probably wants to be have a little additional water through the summertime. All right, thank you for that, by the way, because we missed it. So, okay, and so I think that's really about it. So, just going to end on the last note here. This was kind of a sad day for us tree lovers, us tree huggers. This tree, of course, we tried to save. It's a community tree that many of us really rallied around and tried to save this tree, and we weren't able to do that. Now, I will say, it's not from the city of Coquitlam. It's not in the city of Coquitlam, so you guys are off the hook. But it is a community tree nearby. And as much as it was disappointing to lose this tree, it was really heartening to see all the people come out to say farewell to this tree. And very fitting, being that it's a Himalayan cedar here, somebody put these prayer flags around the tree there, and it was an amazing send-off for this poor tree. But the thing about this is it created community activism. And this is exactly what we need, and this is what we need the most out of all of us. You know, I know that we have some city councillors here from Coquitlam. I know they're good people, so we can talk to them about the need for more park space and more trees. If you don't have a large tree in your front yard, call up the folks in the city and say, hey, you know, do you guys have any large shade trees you could plant in front of my yard for me? If it's, of course, it's on city property. And they'll probably do that. They're doing some good things here in the city, so it's very important. And of course, it's not all about, it's not all serious all the time. We like to have fun as well. We like to celebrate trees, and I know Katie's in this picture. This is our May Day parade. Wonderous Tree Fellowship likes to celebrate trees. We get out there and we kind of have a great time. So if you want to put on a crazy costume and join us in May, the POCO May Day parade, please come out and join us. We have a blast. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Thank you.
I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, and I first came across Derek when he was giving a guided tree walk at Semequala Riverview. And I put his name in my back pocket because I knew at some point we were going to ask Derek to come out and speak. So Derek Churchill is a Red Seal certified landscape horticulturist with over 20 years of experience. And his diverse career includes roles as a business owner, project manager, public parks gardener, and educator of the Red Seal curriculum. So currently he serves as a horticultural consultant, focusing on implementing industry best management practices. And Derek's going to discuss some common landscaping mistakes and share strategies to ensure that our landscapes endure the challenges of climate change. So please join me in welcoming Derek.
All right, so what does this mean? Any guesses? Well, that's actually, Nancy did say, when I talked about this, she did say that WTF does mean Wonderous Tree Fellowship. I did a talk a few years ago with this subject, and one of the students said it was "Where's the forest?" I quite like that. Why trees fail. So this is me, this is my information. I'm quite happy for anybody to contact me with any tree-related questions, and I'll post this up at the end as well. But certainly anybody can reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about trees. And unfortunately in my career, I've seen a lot of trees fail, and they can be avoided. And it's becoming a lot more critical now because our climate is changing. It used to be that we live on the West Coast, and we'd say everything will just grow because it's the West Coast and we can get away with it, anything. And we can't anymore. And our trends have been more and more rain in the winter time and longer, drier summers. But now we're not even seeing trends, we're just seeing weather all over the map. And our trees are saying WTF. So why trees fail is what we're going to talk about. So my background is, I actually used to work at a bank, and I decided to switch things up. Early midlife crisis, found myself running behind a mower, thought, oh hey, I can do this. I already have a pickup truck, that makes me qualified to be a landscaper. So I can just go out and work in the industry and make decisions, life and death decisions, about these living beings called trees. Because I was qualified, I even bought some tools, so I was even very qualified. I had a trailer and a sign on the side of my truck. Like that's great. Like that's how you become qualified in this industry, right? No. So I started in this industry, and I made a lot of mistakes. And I've seen a lot of mistakes along the way. Eventually, I decided to go go to school for it and did the Red Seal curriculum and went and got my arborist certification and tree risk assessment and a bunch of other stuff. And it's like as soon as you start going down the rabbit hole learning things, it's never ending. And you learn about all the mistakes that you've made that you didn't actually realize they were mistakes at the time. So, yeah. So this is Mrs. Tay's property. I looked after her property, or I butchered it. Don't tell her. She was the sweetest, nicest customer, and she hired me. I mean, there's my truck. You could tell that poor truck never knew what was coming when it became a landscape truck. Well, I'll go back to that in a bit. But I'm going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to talk about kids. And everybody here in this room has been a kid and has probably spent time drawing trees. It might be like a nice little scene like this with the house and the sun in the corner and whatnot. Or actually, I was just away this past last weekend, and one of my friend's daughter drew this photo. Drew this one. I thought it was very lovely. And yeah, we got lots more little kids' photos. Or drawings. What are we seeing here that children know when they draw a tree that adults don't know? So every single one of these drawings has a root flare. It's that transition zone from the trunk to the roots, and that's exposed. Which is nice, and this one's more like the style that I would have drawn, but there's always a root flare. And that's important because that means the roots are going to be close to the surface. You have that exposed. If the roots are too deep, they're not going to get air, they're going to have moisture up against the trunk, and the tree's going to suffer. So, as adults, we plant a tree. Just a little delayed on here, I'm too fast. And it looks like this. It looks like a telephone pole coming out of the ground. There's no transition. We have no idea how far down that the roots are, and this tree will suffer. Bob Ross, I don't think I've ever seen him draw a root flare. We do weird things. We pack curves and road base around them, and we really mess up our trees. This one, I was working for a company as a crew trainer, and I went out with one of the crews one day, and I saw this hinoki suffering. And I had to get a better look. I wish I took a before photo before I started digging, but I noticed it was suffering and had parts of it going brown and was not a happy tree. So I went and started excavating, and I found that on the high side it was over 3 feet too deep. And that's because the clients re-landscaped their yard. They wanted to keep the tree, they cared enough to care for the tree, but the tree was in absolute decline. So we like trees, we don't necessarily look after them properly. This one here I had to take a picture of. This is a shopping center. And there's no root flare on this one. I was there when they were planting it, and I felt really, really bad because I kept circling around and like wanting to pull my hair out, and I'm like, should I say something to them or not? This is what they were doing when they were planting it in the ground. So they're planting it over 1 foot too deep. They're leaving the burlap on, they're leaving all the twine on, and the reason why they wanted to plant it that deep is because they said they had to plant on top of the root balls. So they wanted some good, so I keep going back to this tree, and it is slowly declining, and it was only planted last year. We do this, we do molehills or volcano mulching, and we create a nice little habitat for rodents to go in there. It's nice and warm, they can chew away at the bark, and then the roots, of course, are down too deep, so it develops some adventitious roots, and they start growing, and then now they're in this contained anthill or volcanoes, and they start circling around, and then they start girdling the tree. So there's a lot wrong that happens here. When we see one like this, we see, the top is starting to die back. And that's because that's the furthest point for the water to get to when it's bringing it up the tree. And so that's going to be the first point that's going to fail. And so this tree is, because it's been volcano mulched, has dying. So you want to make sure that root flare is always exposed. And you can see you can really clear down, and that's what you need to do to fix these. So this one was given to me. This wasn't one of my work. But we don't look after them as landscapers. We'll take a tree and we'll pick it up at the nursery, and we'll drive it around in a truck all day, flap it around in the back of the truck in the air, and then go and stick it in the ground and say, there we go, we planted it, and then it dies, which is exactly what happened to this Japanese maple, which was very tragic. There was more training needed on this one, because when they're blowing in the wind, the back of the truck, you get wind desiccation, and it loses all the moisture out of the tree, and it's a lot more struggle. When I worked for the District of West Vancouver, I looked after over 50 different park spaces, and we had a storm, and one of the first things I would do when we have a storm is I would go around to a bunch of different parks that I would look after. And I would go to White Cliff first, because usually that would be the most amount of damage. White Cliff was fine. Went to Headland Park in West Vancouver, in Caulfield area, and this is right across the street from the park. And this is the tree that failed. So this is the before, and this is the after. So if this is the only storm damage that happened, how did this happen? Well, I had to look at the piece of the top that was dragged across to the park, and figure out the evidence. And that's where it failed. So we tie up our trees when we plant them, because we're told we're supposed to do that. The landscape standard is only tie them up if you absolutely need to. And if you do 12 to 14 months, tops, or if it's rooted before then, you take the ties off. This was left on forever. And it actually grew around, because this is a pine tree, this is a Austrian pine. It grew quite fast around it, and was still able to supply enough water and nutrients up into the upper canopy, as it's a soft wood, has lots of layers of active xylem, but it was structurally not sound. But I did go back, and it did grow back. So James, you're talking about topping trees. This was a naturally topped tree, and it just shot right back up. Is this the same structural tree as to what it could have been, James? Yeah. So it's they do grow back, not as nice as they were at first, and and when you take off all that energy, or the areas where the tree would grow up and push its energy to, when you take that off, the tree wants to continue to send that energy back up and makes it grow back, usually with a lot more leaders and weaker. This one here, this is a Japanese maple. I was working for the same company I was with before as a crew trainer, and I saw this tree, and my photo doesn't quite give it justice. Above the line, it's actually struggling, and below the line, it looked healthy. I wish I was a better photographer, could take a better photo of that. But I saw this, and right away I'm like, I'm going to have to go take a look at this. And as soon as I go in and take a look at this, I notice that the nursery stake is still on. This is something that needs to be removed right away. You're not supposed to have something that tightly tied up for the tree's life. And if you are going to stake it, restake it properly with some proper arbor tie, some wire banding, not the little twine that the nursery sends it to. Because if we look, at this point, everything above that is where we're struggling. Everything below that was healthy. So that's that tie that was left on there that's seriously harming that tree. This one was sent to me. This person's property, shocked leaves on this tree. The other tree, matching tree, fell over. And what's wrong? So let's look at the base of the first tree. What's going on in this photo? What do we see? Is that irrigation a little bit too close? Was it tied up? Is the metal cage still there? Is there any root flare? So no, that poor tree, everything was done wrong to that. So then we go and look at the other one that fell over, and that's the weak point right where it fell over. So the nurseries, a lot of them will say to leave it tied up. And most cases, a tree will last a year if you just stick it in the ground any old way, as long as you get the water to it. But over time, if you don't plant it right, it's gonna fail. So a nursery in the past would usually have about a 1-year warranty. Most times now, the warranty is it lasts until the end of their driveway. So if you're going to plant a tree, do you want it to last a year, or do you want to plant it properly so that it's going to last 50 years or longer? So always plant things right, have a nice exposed root flare, untie the burlap, untie the twine. The standard is, at the minimum, is to have at least the top third of that root ball exposed so that it can grow out into the expanding soil. There's another failure. This one was in the pot and they never straightened the roots. So when you do plant them, like, you want your roots to be growing out radially like bicycle spokes. If they're circling, they're going to continue to circle and they're going to eventually girdle. So you want to avoid that. And when you plant it, if you cannot straighten those roots, you got to cut those roots off. This one, ball and burlap, ball and socket. And one thing we notice in our urban landscapes is we don't prep the soils properly. We have areas at the side of a house where an excavator during its construction has gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And they've created this hard, compacted subgrade, and then we put a skiff of garden blend soil over top of it, which isn't even soil. And then we have our root ball that's there that we just stick this tree in. So it ends up being a bit of a fail. Because once eventually you can get water separated between these layers, and this tree's gone over. Don't plant it in water. It will not survive. You'll be happy to hear that we fixed the drainage before we actually pulled that out of the hole and decided to fix the drainage before planting that. But when there's water, there's no oxygen. So you think your trees need water, they also need oxygen. So you don't want to drown them. This is another ball and socket. So this one, you can tell that it leaned over and it started to straighten because you see some of the branches now going vertical. And then we see our tree bags on trees all through the year. They're only supposed to be on for the first 1 or 2 years of establishment of a tree, and only during the hot, dry summer months, not all year round. This is creating an environment for moisture to get into your tree at the base and rot out your tree trunk. You don't want that. Of course, I had to take this picture of who's watering their trees in winter. This one here, this was in Ambleside Park, and I had to rescue this one. And the photo doesn't show, but there's just all wood bugs all over, just a lot of decaying wood. And then good old Canadian Tire parking lot in North Vancouver. Capsera trees, lovely trees, great for fall color. You'd think that this is well past fall because the leaves are all down, But no, this is in the middle of the summer. So these are trees that like a lot of water, and it's a drought, and there's parking lot everywhere, and not a lot of water. A lot of people say don't plant Catsura trees at all. Just the right tree in the right place. I find if you've got an area where the roots can spread, and you've got larger conifers around, so it's not fully fully directly in the sun to bake, they're a great tree. But right tree, right place. Very few trees, the right places in the middle of the parking lot, but we do have to try. And so they do try, and they add water bags. So, I prefer the donut style water bag if you are going to use one, just because it does keep moisture away from the trunk. But it does need to be on absolutely flat ground to work, or else when you're mulching your tree, mulch it in the shape of a donut, and so you can actually fill it full of water, and the water will slowly drain into. Can't see the sign behind here. There is a sign in there. Don't plant trees where they're going to block a sign. It's planned deforestation. Eventually these trees are going to fail. Somebody's going to have to come by the engineering department and say, that tree can't be there anymore. So you got to be thoughtful about where you plant them. The tree grates, they're meant to cut them to make them bigger. Nobody ever does. Any gardener or landscaper who looks after a commercial property like this should have an angle grinder so that they are not afraid of cutting a new, making that hole bigger in the middle. And then, of course, Christmas lights. Left on forever will girdle a tree. I've seen so many fail. Little roto here, struggling. Any guesses why it's struggling? Yeah, landscape cloth. So there's a little bit of landscape fabric there showing, and what's happened there is that landscape fabric, even though they advertise that it's permeable, it's not. And so it's an absolute barrier, doesn't allow soil to break down through, and it doesn't allow all the water to go through. So this tree is struggling. Never use landscape fabric. This is actually a picture I took when I was up in Whitehorse. This is actually the standard that they have for planting beds. So if any horticulturists here want to lend their services up to Whitehorse, like there's some gardening jobs that are needed. This is grass all around, so it's had the whippersnipper and it's had the mower crash up against it. Have a nice tree ring around your trees to protect it. Nice tree circle. This one here is down by Science World. So I love trees, and you're talking about putting trees in like play spaces and whatnot, and great. Maybe not just right in the middle. There's lots of opportunity. And if you see that little white little cap there, that's so that you can water the tree. So now it's alive. It surprised me. I keep going back to this tree and keep thinking, is it still alive? Is it going to survive? And it is still alive. It's surviving, it's not thriving. So this is it from another angle a little bit later. So you see they put a tree bag over it. I don't know if they're still watering it through the little cap. But you see in behind, there's another tree planted at the exact same time that's in a garden. And that garden is nice soil and great, and that tree is looking so much better. So this park had a lot of opportunities to plant trees in great spaces, but they wanted to put one right in the middle of the playground, and I don't think that was the right spot. I applaud the effort though. So one of the things that happens, and this is a bit of planned deforestation, when a new development happens, we all decide to, okay, we're going to remove some trees, we got to plant some trees back. Well, if we plant some trees back in there, but we've maximized the footprint of the property, now we're having a hard time finding space for these trees. And we're putting trees in areas where they're just not going to be able to survive and long term. And I was having a conversation with a developer, and they want some of these trees to fail over time because there just isn't the space for them. That's not every developer, but that was just one conversation I had. So you gotta try. Yeah. I don't know, I just like that. Scary, climate change. Who's ever seen an English laurel fail? I hadn't until about 2 years ago. These are one of the toughest trees. They're invasive. You should never plant them. But here's some, and they were poorly planted, but they're English laurels. They should survive. And now I'm seeing situations where English laurels are failing. Like here's a row of English laurels, and you can see the three on the end are suffering. And I'm seeing that more and more. I'm seeing they're more susceptible to our cold periods, and they're struggling. And if the English laurels are struggling, we really have to be seriously, about how we plant and take care of our trees. We have to look after them. We have to do them right, because if we do them right, they'll have the best chance to succeed. It's not the West Coast. Everything's going to grow anymore. You know, here's our yews failing. Trees we think would be doing well are not. Of course, we know our emerald green cedars are. Please don't plant any more of those. They don't make it. They mass produce them at these tree farms. Usually the root ball is about the same size on a 10-foot tree as it is on a 6-foot tree, and they're just not set to work in our climate anyway. Then our landscape's too much water, so I talk about prepping the landscape. This is an area, like when the houses are built, new houses, new construction, you need to be digging and have the excavator driver go, and as he's leaving an area to scoop and drop, scoop and drop, scoop and drop, and try and not leave this compacted mess of soil as a subgrade on a construction site. Because when you try and do a landscape over top of it, it just doesn't work. And we see these trees struggling from, this was mechanical damage, but now there's this maple's trying to grow again. Yeah, so this is where I want to get this back to Mrs. Tay's. Good old Mrs. Tay. She had her plum tree there, and she said, "Derek, can you prune that for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I even got a ladder in my truck. Like, I'm great. I can do this." And so I pruned it. Okay, am I gonna have to leave out the back now, or it's like, I thought I did a great job. This is way before I went to school and learned stuff. So I thought I did a great job. So I did what's called lion tailing, where you can just prune what you can reach. And I over pruned. Like on a mature tree, like a cherry tree, like a plum tree, like now I try and not take off more than 10% at a single season. This was a lot more than that. So certainly the landscaper came by and said, "Sure, I can do that." So what's the harm? It's going to grow back, right? There it is, kind of growing back. Look, now it's a lovely tree, right? Lovely tree, right? What happened was the drought came along in like 2015, 2016, and those couple years of drought absolutely stressed out this tree. It was already stressed out from somebody's pruning job, and then the drought came along, and it absolutely it wrecked it. Because basically trees, they have all their stored starches in their root zone, and that's their bank account. And then when it has stress, it wants to grow from those stored starches in the root zone. But if you've tapped those out, it's not going to grow back. So multiple successes of hot, dry summers on top of mine, it basically, yeah, it did make it. So, yeah, whippersnipper on the cherry tree, planting a tree right in front of an exhaust vent. You know, all these things can be avoided. Well, maybe the truck was aiming, I don't know. Yeah, we want to build a fence. What do you want, a fence or a tree? Yeah. So, yeah. I'm going to end on this one. This one, it's a hemlock that was a nurse. It was a nurse tree. It was a nurse stump. And there's a fellow that went and carved out the nurse stump. I'm not recommending to do this. There's a lot of ecology reasons why not to do this. But it was just what he did, and he collected all these rocks, which has been placed them over the root zone. Not so great. But anyway, it made for an interesting looking tree. So, yeah, my biggest takeaway from today is essentially you have to do everything right, because before we used to be able to get away with everything. We used to make all these mistakes and get away with them. Now we can't make these mistakes and get away with them with the way our climate is. So we have to do things right. There is a Canadian landscape standard. Everybody should look that up, or at least if you're having work done, make sure people are well versed in it and know how to do things right. And yeah, and that's me and why trees fail.
I just want to first of all say that I hope that tonight's Trees for a Changing Landscape workshop succeeded in providing some tools and some empowerment for you to all go out and start building a little bit of this urban forest in your own backyards. And we talked about how we can move towards tree equity in our own neighborhoods in light of some pretty big challenges, including climate change, of course, and densification. So we're asking you to look at the resource materials that we provided to you in the workshop and to consider, doing some advocacy work, speaking out, writing to your elected representatives, and making sure that we're all standing up for the urban forest. And we're also asking you to take some of those trees and plants and the landscaping materials home with you and put them into your own backyard. Share the information that you learned tonight and be part of this movement to ensure a healthy urban forest for every single person in the Tri-Cities. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to Nature Canada for the work that they do to promote tree equity across Canada and for funding our event tonight. Our gratitude goes to wonderful partners. Of course, we have Wonderous Tree Fellowship, Burke Mountain Naturalists, and the Tri-Cities Urban Forest Working Group for being engaged and for caring about our environment. I would like to thank Siobhan and Douglas Collage for providing us with a space to do our workshop tonight, and to the City of Coquitlam for their commitment to a healthy urban forest and for offering free trees and compost to participants tonight. To Tri-Cities Dispatch and the Tri-City News, our local media. We're losing our local media, and it's really important. They're part of the glue, what holds this community together. They helped us to get word out about this event, and I just want to express my gratitude and how important it is that we really try and hang on to as much local media as we can. To our friends at Tri-Cities Community Television for recording this event so it can go out to a wider audience later on. I'd like to thank Sierra Club BC and David Quick, who's here with us tonight, for all the great work they've done on a document called Climate Ready Communities, a toolkit for local government. I drew on some of that for my presentation, and it's in your resource materials. I really encourage everyone to read that. It's got a lot of good information. I'd like to thank our speakers, Ed Hall, James Bobick, and Derek Churchill, for sharing their passion and their knowledge with you tonight. And to each one of you, all the elected representatives that came out, despite your busy schedules. And to city staff, we have a lot of Coquitlam city staff join us tonight, and we really, really appreciate having you here. And to all the residents who came out. So on behalf of Wondrous Tree, Burke Mountain Naturalists, and the Tri-Cities Urban Forest Working Group, we thank you for being here. We hope you'll build that urban forest. And we also hope you'll keep in touch, and we look forward to seeing you at our next workshop. So thanks everyone, and don't forget to stop and take some plants on the way out. There will be folks for the City of Coquitlam who have some trees ready for you. If you want to pick up compost, you can go out the doors here and pick it up in the parking lot. For those of you who want to stay and have some questions, that's great too. And one last final thing is that there's lots of opportunities to get out and have some tree walks. The Tree Spree folks do it, look them up. We have an Earth Day tree walk in Port Moody coming up on April 26th. And we have the Smiquella Riverview guided tree walks, and the next one is coming up April 13th. So we hope to see you out on a guided tree walk, and I hope to see you again. So thank you so much.